I am Anna Seawald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, how to recover from burnout by regulating your emotions and nervous system. What if recovering from burnout isn't about doing more, but learning how to regulate what's already happening inside you? In today's episode, I am joined by Michelle Grossner. She is an attorney, pastor, nervous system expert, certified master life coach, and host of the Calm Mom podcast. Through somatic and neuroscience-based modalities, she coaches women through discovering what's beneath their triggers and emotions so that they can begin their healing journey and find peace in the present. She deeply believes that the most profound thing we can offer our children is our own healing. She and her husband Jeff have 2 daughters and live in Houston, Texas. Michelle is a former high achiever who found herself in deep burnout. Not just physical exhaustion, but a complete emotional and physiological overload, insomnia, chronic tension, and a disconnection from herself that no productivity hack could fix. Together, we explore how real recovery begins by tuning into the body and learning to regulate both the nervous system and our emotional landscape. Michelle opens up about the cultural pressures that pushed her to suppress emotions and ignore discomfort, and how embracing softness, slowing down, and using somatic tools led to true healing. This conversation is full of grounded, practical tools, from movement and stillness to breath work and sensory resets that you can use right away to shift your state. But more than that, it's an invitation to relate to your emotions, not just obstacles, but as vital signals guiding you back to balance. We have covered the topic of nervous system regulation, emotion regulation for parents and children on the podcast in various episodes, and I want to highlight a few that I hope you will find helpful. Number 1, there is an excellent episode with Deb Dana titled Befriending Your Nervous System. I think you'll find it super helpful. Number 2, there is an episode titled How to Regulate Your Nervous System with Jenn, Mann. Another one that is geared towards children with fantastic Mona Delahooke is called How to Help Kids with Emotional Self-Regulation. And another one I'll throw in there is called The Secret Language of the Body with Jenn, Mann and Karden, Rabin. If you're a relatively new listener, I have put together something called the Trauma Kit. I handpicked 10 episodes that are all about understanding how trauma impacts our brain, body, relationships, and parenting, and tools for nervous system regulation and trauma healing. 10 fantastic episodes with world-class experts, and it's free to download. Go to authenticparenting.com/trauma kit to access that resource. I hope you will find that resource helpful. And now, please enjoy, and thank you for listening. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy to be here.
I love connecting with other podcasters for one reason and one reason only. They always have a good microphone. You know,
Plus.
it's a plus. And having, a guest who also talks about similar topics is like a double win, So I'm excited to talk to you. I know you talk a lot about on your show about burnout prevention, right? Nervous system regulation, 3 tools to do this, 5 steps to do that, very practical. And you have online courses. But what I want to know is, I know you've been a lawyer before and having children is hard. So take me back to
Mhm.
that time when you felt like you were in burnout
Yeah.
and you said, you know what, I'm going to change something about the way I live and operate.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was probably in earlier stages of burnout for a long time. And I think I was experiencing a lot of mental and emotional symptoms of burnout that I was just kind of chalking up to being high achieving or my personality or being busy or all of these different things. And I just did what I knew how to do in those times. And that was just keep pushing, right? Keep showing up, keep pushing harder. I'm going to get through it. It'll get easier. I'll feel better next week or what have you. And lo and behold, that's not how burnout actually heals. But it wasn't until I had children. My daughters are 16 months apart. So when my oldest was 4 months old, I realized I was pregnant again. And it was at that I was running my own law firm in downtown Miami. I had a whole team, a whole staff, a full caseload. And very naively, I knew that some things would change having kids. And I also thought that I could just bring them to the office and kind of keep going. And I tried to do that. I was taking depositions during nap time and negotiating contracts while breastfeeding. And, I look back now and I'm like, wow, it's nuts, right? Like, how come no one kind of like shook me and was like, this is not sustainable. But my body is so wise. And I think as I continued to ignore the mental and emotional symptoms, then the physical symptoms really started. And my body's like, if you're not going to slow down, I'll slow you down. And that's really where I feel like I experienced the pit of burnout that really forced me to get some help, reassess, what my day to day looked like, humble myself, embrace my limit, learn that there were paradigms that I'd been holding and patterns I'd been running forever that were actually quite poor coping mechanisms. And there were better ways to do things. And I think I guess like any good attorney, I got really curious and started investigating, why does it feel like my body's kind of revolting against me in my mind and I can't sleep anymore and I feel anxious and irritable all the time. And what I found at that time, I hired my own coach and I worked with a functional medicine practitioner. And what I found as the through line ultimately was that my nervous system was just so dysregulated, and learning at a really root level, I think, how to start healing and regulating my nervous system, things started to heal, right? And started to change, and those symptoms started to dissipate, and my joy started coming back, and my bandwidth grew. And I don't know, it got me really excited and gave me hope again, and transitioned to the work that I'm doing now, which is, teaching women who are in a similar season as I was in how to do the same thing with their own bodies.
Where were the physical symptoms besides the sleep that you were experiencing?
Yeah, so I had chronic muscle tension, aches and pains in my joints all the time, right? Even I remember back to like middle school, high school. I was an athlete and like having to get massages because my neck and shoulders would just kind of freeze up and I'd have issues turning my head, chronic gut issues. I always had food sensitivities, bloating. I was gluten-free for 7 years, trying to figure out what was going on there. Insomnia was one for me, headaches and migraines. I was convinced I had some sort of autoimmune condition because I was just chronically like not feeling well and exhausted. And what we know is that a lot of, chronic autoimmune conditions or just chronic conditions are rooted in inflammation, which is caused by nervous system dysregulation. So those were the big physical ones that showed up for me.
Mm. And how did you get in touch with that coach who helped you? Like, did you read something? Like, where did that first aha come from? Like, how did you know where to go? Right? A lot of people don't know. They can be stuck in burnout, and I have been in burnout. I didn't even know that was burnout until you come out of it and you're like, wow, that was burnout. So tell me, like, what informed you to take actions?
Yeah. So I didn't actually know that that's what I was seeking. I think at the time I was just feeling so unlike myself. Like I was just like, I don't know if there's any way out of this. Like I know this isn't me. I can remember a time where I had energy and patience and enjoyed things and wanted to be social. And that version of me just feels so far away. So I hired a life coach, and I'm so grateful that she was someone who knew a lot about somatics, first of all, and the nervous system. She was trauma informed. She kind of helped me flip so many of my stories. And so I guess it was serendipitous in a sense, but she really taught me what was happening in my body.
That's great. I mean, what you said you were an athlete in school. What sport did you play?
Yeah, so I went to a small school in northern Maine. So there's a ton of competitive sports there. So I played almost all of them. I'm very tall, so I played basketball and I played soccer and I played tennis and I played softball and I skied, all the things.
The reason I'm asking is like, isn't that interesting how like sport is something you do with your body, but then you find yourself so disconnected from it. You ignore the pains and the aches because you have to perform and get to the next level. And it's just ironic, I feel like, right?
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we're just not really taught how to drop in and connect with our body. We're not really taught about somatic cues and our body actually speaking to us. And I think, we live in a culture that pain, whatever's going on in our body, the sensations that we're experiencing are messengers, right? They're just trying to communicate with us. And we live in a culture and a society that is so quick to silence the messenger, right? Instead of listen. So, you have an ache and a pain. It's like, take an Advil or take this or put heat on it or what have you, instead of really getting curious about what's going on. And I'm someone who's always been very comfortable in my head. Like I can plan all the things and think through it and intellectualize it and come up, with the task list and 3-step plan and all those things. But when it came to my burnout and my nervous system, that wasn't going to cut it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think some of the messaging in the culture is like, if you get the supplement, if you go to this retreat, if you buy this product, if you engage in this program, there's so many things to optimize and maximize and your productivity, your this, your that. Like you constantly end up falling into the same trap in different forms. But so I think the main thing is to recognize what the trap is, right? Because you end up coming out of one trap and falling into another trap, what I call the performance trap. And I think you just mentioned in the beginning, I want to talk about this a little bit, this achievement, performance, goal-oriented. We live in America. That's how it is, right? Everything. You have to even optimize your parenting. We're doing parenting podcasts. You have to read books. You constantly have to evolve and grow. And if you're not doing it, you're not doing it right. And this, like I was thinking about our conversation today, and something came to me. It's like we're constantly, and I'm guilty about this too, because I also have a podcast about personal development and parenting. The longer I am doing the podcast and thinking about things, it's becoming clear that like doing this work on yourself, even just that sentence, that sentiment is so wrong and flawed and misleading and harmful. Like you don't have to do work on yourself. Let's stop that. Let's neglect that idea. You can change and grow and things like that, acquire new habits, but that becomes its own task, but it's the same trap.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And I think, so much of it too is these patterns of, masculine energy, right? It's like do more, achieve, do. That's what's rewarded by society. And that's what we expect of our kids. But the balance, right, is lost, right? The need to have and explore the other parts of us. And for a lot of us who run those patterns of overachieving and being busy and doing all the things and being productive and hustling and getting things done, that's not where we're going to grow. Where we're going to grow is like, how can we surrender to being softer, right? How can we actually slow down? That's where we will find our healing, not in doing more work, just in learning actually how to be.
Are you looking for personalized support on your parenting journey? I offer one-on-one coaching tailored to your needs, including court-ordered parenting classes and co-parenting counseling. These services are available to anyone, no matter where you live, whether in the United States or abroad. As a special thank you to my listeners, you can enjoy 10% off all coaching packages. Visit authenticparenting.com to learn more about my services and how we can work together to achieve your parenting goals. Yeah. So what kind of messages did you get growing up or, about achievement? And like many of us are receiving that your worth is tied to your achievement, to your grades, to your performance. And so everybody's sort of stuck in that, in that cycle. So tell me a little bit about how you grew up, what was expected of you, or did you just internalize that from the larger society, maybe from the school? Because I can tell you, I don't push my kid, but the environment that she's in is like that. It's not always the parents per se, there are other influences. But so tell me where you get that and what was it like growing up?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think you're right. I know for me, at least, I'm the oldest daughter of 5 kids. So I think
Right
there's,
there, right?
of
It's
course,
already.
right? There's something right there just in birth order that plays a role in it. And, I have great parents. And when you have 5 children and are working full time and doing all the things that parents are doing, there's not a lot of energy and attention and bandwidth. Like all these things are limited, right? And so I think for me, my nervous system came to know that when I achieve and when I get honor roll and when I get captain of this team and first chair in the orchestra and all of the things, right? That's when I'm told that I'm being seen, right? That's when I'm like, I get the atta girl. That's when I get like, oh, thank goodness that you're so easy because your brothers are so hard, or, whatever the messaging that's kind of coming through. And my nervous system, which is always seeking only 2 things, safety and approval, right? To be safe and secure and to be loved and accepted is like, oh, this is really good. Let's do more of that. And it just becomes this pattern that subconsciously I pick up and run. And absolutely, it's reinforced by our society, especially playing sports, competition, getting into college. I went to college, 25 years ago. I can only imagine what it's like now. You're being groomed to be the top of the top, cream of the crop from such a young age, and our vision is so myopic. Like we miss so much more of the broader, what does it take to be and raise healthy human beings that can actually separate from the things that they do and achieve and still find so much value and worthiness in themselves. And I can really relate to what you're saying about your daughters. My kids are younger, they're 6 and 8, but man, I noticed something when they were in kindergarten that they had like a spelling test every Friday and they would have like 7 or 8 words, right? And I would help them study it during the week. And it's so silly, but you just catch these patterns in you that show up in your parenting. And I would pick them up on Friday and I would catch the first thing I would ask them is like, hey, how'd you do on your spelling test? Right. And then they would tell me. And then if it was great, I'd whatever, affirm them and celebrate them and what have you. And then when I caught it, I'm like, oh my goodness, like I'm setting them up to run the same patterns that I'm trying to heal in myself. And there's nothing sinister about that, right? But it's just like what I know. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have that awareness and be like, I made a decision. I'm like, I am not asking them about anything as it relates to their schoolwork or their grades or what they got anymore, right? There's so many other things that are more important that I could ask them when I pick them up at the end of the school day, especially in kindergarten. But yeah, those patterns run deep.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so let's fast forward now. You are a different person. What are some steps have you taken with that coach, after that coach, that was like immediately helpful? Like looking back, what helped you to come out of that severe burnout?
Yeah. I think it was a lot of things. I think one of the greatest things that made such a difference that's very underrated and we don't talk about is that I learned what to do with my emotions. I think that was part of just the personality that I thought I had, right? I'm like, I'm not a crier. I'm not an emotional person. I don't get angry. I never yell, right? And I had this like story about myself that I thought was really good and like self-controlled and what have you. But what I realized is I was just so good at repressing and suppressing my emotions. Like I had so much anger inside of me. I just didn't know what to do with it. And I had so many labels and fears, associated with these different emotions: anger, rage, disappointment, frustration, sadness, grief, like the uncomfortable ones, right? So really learning to shift, I think, my paradigms and mindsets around emotions, and then teaching my body that it's actually safe and good to release these emotions in a healthy way, right? Having tools and practices to do that. Because when we again, are running patterns of suppressing and repressing these things, we don't realize the toll that that takes on our body. It is exhausting. I mean, emotions, just the word itself, emotion is energy, right? So energy in motion, emotion. And when we're holding that in, it's like we're holding a big, I don't know, inflated beach ball underwater, right? And like we can hold it for so long, but then our arms kind of start shaking. And, before we know it, that thing pops up and it splashes on everybody. And it's the same with our emotions. So really starting to have practices to allow myself to feel and release a lot of those big emotions. I was shocked by how much space that created for me. And the other thing that was interesting is that what we know about a lot of those big emotions, let's take, for example, anger, right? Or rage. If we have kind of muted and dulled our ability to experience that sensation, we can't just like pick and choose the emotions that we want to feel or not, right? We know that we also end up muting joy, right? So everything just feels kind of dull. So when we allow ourselves to feel safe enough to experience those big emotions, it also allows our body to feel safe enough to experience the ones that we actually do want to experience more of. So that was a big one for me that was kind of unexpected.
Wow, yes, I'm going to explore this a little more. I love this. And of course, you're speaking my language here. And I just was reminded of a quote that I have in my phone. I have like this notes in my notes where I collect interesting quotes. And one of them, I was just going through it the other day and it's fresh in my mind. And it goes along with what you're just saying. It goes like this: joy can only fill your heart as deep as sorrow carves it. Isn't that good? I just love that quote. How did you then learn about this emotional intelligence and, allowing your emotions? Because people hear that, but nevertheless, it's hard, right? Like, where do you start? And I'm being very purposefully, very simplistic, because oftentimes people hear and they're still confused. So since you're open to talking about this and you struggled with this, how did it look like for you? Was it gradual? Like, did you take a dictionary of emotions? Like, how did you do this work?
Yeah, it was so uncomfortable. But I think I had bought in to what would be on the other side if I could just lean into that discomfort. So that helped. But I think it started by really growing in awareness of how I was responding to my own emotions, right? So instead of immediately just moving, let's say I was having a conversation with my husband and he said something and it really hurt my feelings. And I kind of would feel like that lump in my throat or my body get warm or my eyes start to tear up. My old pattern right away would have been to like push that right back down where it came from, right? So I'm subconsciously greeting it with judgment. Don't be weak. Don't cause a stir here. Don't whatever the story was, right? And I wasn't creating space for myself to actually feel and express that. So for me, starting to catch those somatic cues of the emotions wanting to be released and then deciding in that moment, hey, I'm not going to run this old pattern of shoving that back down. I'm actually going to honor what's coming up and allow myself to feel it. And in those early days of doing that, I mean, I tell you, my husband, he's amazing and he's such a safe space for me. And I told him, I'm like, listen, something that I'm working on is feeling my emotions. This is super awkward and uncomfortable for me. But when I feel like tears are coming up, I'm going to be trying to actually cry and not push them back down. like I've done for the past 30 years. So if you see me doing that, like, can you just be gentle and just like understand that this is what's going on for me, you know? And he did, but like I would have to sit there and actually like be a little cheerleader in my head and be like, hey, Michelle, you're doing great. It's okay to cry. Let it out, right? The tears are there, the lump in your throat, the anger, the frustration, the rage, like finding ways to tell myself and encourage myself it's safe for you to do this. Because if you get curious about how you handle your emotions, especially the big ones like anger and rage, right? We usually tend to fall on one of two spectrums. You're either like me and you were like, I don't do that, right? I'm calm. I've got it. Or we're on the other end and our anger and rage tends to come out really quickly, right? If our children or husband or a side eye from somebody and it's like, it'll come right out. And neither of those is healthy. So I started to get curious, like, man, how were emotions talked about when I grew up? How did my parents model or not emotions, right? Did they teach us about emotions in a healthy way, but then I never saw them crying or I never saw them angry in a healthy way, or what were they doing? And just like, again, awareness of like, oh, that's why I've been doing this. It doesn't feel safe because it's unfamiliar, but it actually is really safe and so good for my mind, body, soul, and spirit for me to feel grief and sadness and frustration and rage and all the whole range of human emotion. So starting really, really uncomfortable and awkward and sharing it with someone else, and then just continuing to honor it as it came up, and it got easier over time.
Mm. Did you go to therapy or with that coach, something like that? Did you continue working?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've always had, I mean, since then, and since I've really, I guess, started this journey for myself, I've always had a coach that I've worked with. So yeah, I think that can be really helpful because, you know, we all have blind spots. So to have someone help you to see those and then navigate them is certainly valuable.
Yeah, and also have a safe space where you can express your feelings and be with your feelings, right? And process them. So, you can do it with your husband or partner, but that may overwhelm them as well if they also have, this connection from their own feelings. It's never our partner's job per se to heal us or anything like that. But I think it's so great that you informed your husband of the work that you were doing so that he knew and you were not pleasing him or, curtailing your feelings so that he won't get overwhelmed or upset. Like we do have tendencies like that. Oftentimes we don't feel the emotion because it could be uncomfortable for the other person,
For
right?
sure. I think we do that with our kids a lot.
We do. And so having like a safe space, therapist, like if someone is listening, it is okay to seek professional help because if you don't have that space available, doing this work on your own, it could be hard, and when someone just creates the space and holds your hand and helps you label and make sense of the stories and the feelings, I think you gain more confidence and then later you can do it on your own. I think I just wanted to say that. Another thing I want to talk about is, well, there is the feeling of the feeling, right? The somatic bodily sensation level of attuning to our body and recognizing what we're feeling in the moment. And there is the expression of the emotion. These are two different things. And there is the later stage is processing of the feeling, right? Oftentimes people say, I want to feel my feelings, but what they really mean is like they want to either process, like talk about those feelings,
That's right.
or I don't know, something like that. So talk to me. This is my understanding. And you're nodding. That means you also share or it resonates with you. So let's talk about this for the listeners. There is the feeling of the feeling. There is the expression of that feeling. And there is the processing of that feeling. And they don't all have to happen at the same time, right? So tell me your experience.
Yeah. So I guess that first step is noticing the somatic cues, right? So if we talk about anger, for example, we can probably think about how that feels in our body, right? Our heart starts to beat faster. Maybe our face even gets red. We start to feel hot. Our voice might raise, right? Our palms might clench, like whatever we do when we feel anger. And I'm the same as you. I work with so many women and I'll talk to them about this and they're like, I get angry. I feel angry a lot. And I'm like, Yes, you feel angry, but then what do you do with that? Right. And then that's where we get stuck. We're like, but I don't know what to do with it. And then that part of expressing it is really what I think needs to be taught and practiced and kind of played around with and made to feel safe enough, kind of to your point. So let's keep going with anger, I guess. What would it look like to actually express and allow that to release from your body, right? Well, I mean, 2-year-olds know how to do this. What would a 2-year-old do if he was really angry, right? He wouldn't just feel all of that anger in his body and then stop there and continue playing. He would scream. He would pound his fists. He would roll on the ground. He would stomp his feet. He might throw something or hit something. So how can we allow ourselves to do that in a safe and healthy way? Right. So, and it might look exactly like that. Like you can allow yourself to have an adult temper tantrum. Maybe if you experience something during the day with your kids and you're at the grocery store and it just made you so angry, not appropriate in that moment to express that anger, right? But you can come back to it after you've put everyone to bed at the end of the night and you can push into a wall, right? You can take a pool noodle and go in the backyard and just hit it against the ground. You can scream into a pillow. You can, punch your pillow. Sometimes I just go in the car and I'm like, ah, and I just try to let it out. And if we don't interrupt the release of emotions, right? It's kind of like riding a wave. If we don't interrupt that process once it's started, and by interrupt it, I mean, that little voice that chimes in and is like, you're out of your mind. This is crazy. You're nuts. This is out of control, or what have you, that little judgmental voice. If we can get to a place where like, no, this is good. You're going to be such a better parent. If you get this out, you're going to feel so much more expansive. Like, let this go. This is great for your energy levels. You're going to sleep better, what have you. That wave of release of those emotions only takes our body about 90 seconds, right? To feel it and then allow it to kind of come back. And then our body kind of regulates itself. And then we can go on with our day. So those are the types of practices that we want to play around with in feeling the emotion and then expressing and releasing the emotion. And then, yes, if we have questions or want to get curious about, what's triggering this or what's beneath this or where does it come from, or it feels like it keeps coming back because I have so many stories going on about it and I'm not getting out of my head and into my body, then those are, distinct phases. But they do. I think a lot of us can notice when we feel a certain way, but then we don't really know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, there is, as I'm listening to you, thinking about one thing, that there is the present moment experience, right? Something happens in the present moment. You get an email of rejection, and that evokes something in you. You become angry or frustrated or whatever, however you react emotionally. That there is something in the present moment, but the present moment emotion is always connected to the older patterns or the programming or the trauma responses, right? To the memories. It sort of creates associations. And I think recognizing, sort of learning to separate and not give too much meaning to the current present moment emotion. But if you have the time and the space to observe and feel and release and let go, I think that would be so helpful. It can create more spaciousness. But when we suppress and repress and try to make meaning and interpret and just like the old stuff bubbles up and it's become like heavy and ugly, I think learning to experience present moment emotions as they arise is different than doing that sort of inner work of excavating your past traumas and opening the little like memories and feeling the feelings, That's how I see it. I think like healing happens in the present moment. Because whatever arises, it arises now. It doesn't matter what the root cause was, where were you told, whatever. It just arises now and it creates this regulation in your body. And learning to be with the emotion and regulate your nervous system right now in this very moment is the healing.
Yeah, I think we overestimate how much relief understanding will bring us, right? And that's not always the solution. Sometimes we feel like we get a glimpse of understanding and it actually causes more pain, you know? So you're right. It's just what's happening right now in the present. Can I be with that, right? Can I give myself maybe what was missing in the past and be there for myself now without having to excavate and understand and all some, you know, our body is it's real for our body right now, and that can be enough.
Yeah, I mean, you can still do the excavation work in a therapeutic setting or with the coach, or you create time and space for that. I think that there is importance to that. I've been to therapy myself, and I think it's valuable, but I think not everything has big significance. Emotions are so momentary; they come and go, and it could be something it could be hormonal. Right? Your mood changes so frequently with hormones, with what you ate, how much you slept. So when you feel something in the moment, trying to assign a deep meaning and going to your childhood, like, no, let's like lighten this a little bit and feel what's arising now and know that this will pass. Let me be with it, observe and note and breathe through it. Do I have the capacity for that? Like slowly we can, I think, develop that capacity. That's what I've done for myself over the years. Yeah. So how does this resonate? Is there anything you want to say to this, or is like, should we go to a different topic?
No, I agree. And I think, I guess a couple of things that are coming up. One, it's uncomfortable, right? So it requires a certain level of courage to do that. And I acknowledge that. And then I think the second thing, and this is probably what prevents most of us from having practices that help us manage our emotions in a healthy way, is that we're moving too fast, right? Because to do what you said with an email coming in, for example, you have to actually slow down to be able to notice and then honor whatever's coming up in the moment, right? But so many of us are running a pace that doesn't allow for that. So it can be really hard.
Oh, I can give a fresh example. Yesterday, I had a pretty like busy day. I'm always very balanced, I would say. I have found like what works for me at this age. Like I'm almost 51. So I finally mastered self-care at the root. But yesterday it was a tough day in to some extent. And we had an appointment for my daughter, and we were going to be late. And I called to notify them that I would like to reschedule because I knew we were not going to make the appointment on time. So let's be respectful of their time and not be stressed ourselves. So, and the woman on the phone, obviously she's the front desk person. She's not, making decisions, or she's not the one who charges money for the service, let's say, right? She says, "Oh, I just want to let you know that we charge a cancellation fee, $50." And I immediately went into this, of course you do, this sarcastic mode. And then I muted myself and I'm like, "You stupid woman. Of course you do." Like I was shouting in the air what I was feeling. And then I'm like, why am I like yelling? Like I was yelling but at her, but I was muted so she wouldn't hear. But I noticed that I have this sarcasm and anger was coming. And I'm like, where is this? Like, Anna, come on. Like, she's not the decision maker. And, when I unmuted myself and I said, "Oh, thank you for rescheduling. I really appreciate blah, blah, blah." And I said, "I'm sorry. I was, I apologize." But like, I did
It's
that,
real.
right? Like, I
Yeah.
recognize that I'm snarky, I'm snappy, that's the first like level of anger, right? Then you get into, yeah. So that was my experience yesterday.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone can relate. We've all had moments like that. I mean, talk about parenting, right? It's like what a journey, what a journey of emotions that brings up.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I can tell you so many stories. So let's go to what do you do today? How do you take care of your nervous system as you go through your day? What are some self-care things that you do, maintain your well-being in a balanced and flexible way? So tell me, what practices do you have? What you find effective? I like practical things from different people.
Sure. So I have things that I try to do daily that on a foundational level help me to feel grounded and regulated and able to show up how I want to show up. And then I also have tools and practices in the moment for when I feel myself starting to become dysregulated during the day, however that shows up. So the big picture, like foundational things that I try to do every day there's three of them. The first one is move my body, right? Moving our body, exercise is the most efficient way to close the stress cycle and regulate our nervous system. There's just no way around it. We talk about being in fight or flight, right? An activation of our sympathetic nervous system. And even just the name of that state, fight or flight, when you're in that state, feeling activated, anxious, worried, angry, irritable, edgy, what have you, every cell in our body is primed for movement, to fight or to run, right? So allowing ourselves to move, giving ourselves that space. I'm not talking about like going to CrossFit or doing, some high intensity workout, but like just going for a walk, doing some stretching, doing some Pilates, like moving your body every day is so important for maintaining a resilient nervous system. The second thing I incorporate every day is at least 10 minutes of stillness. And that was probably the hardest of the three for me when I started to have these practices. Because one, I was running a story that I don't have time for that. And then second, being still and not doing anything felt so uncomfortable. It was almost like punishment, it was really hard. I had to start with just like, can I, fold laundry for a few minutes without listening to a podcast? Or can I drive to the grocery store without having something playing in the background before a stillness practice really grew? So don't overcomplicate that one, just going for the walk without your phone or without your headphones, or just seeing ways in which you can start to reduce, I think the stimulation and the input is really valuable for your brain and thus your nervous system. And then the third practice that I try to incorporate every day is play. So doing something, again, without overthinking it, not something that has to be pre-planned or whatever, but like what kinds of things do I like to do genuinely, right? Not because they're good for my kids or my family or what have you, not because they serve some end, but just because the process itself brings me joy. So maybe it's, I don't know, for you, maybe it's an instrument, or maybe it's a sport, or maybe it's baking, or maybe it's sewing, or maybe it's, I don't know, going to play tennis. But there are things that, when we feel safe, when we play, we feel safe, right? If we were, just think about our evolution, being chased by a lion, a tiger, a bear, like we would not be able to sit down and play and do these things that bring us so much joy. And that's why they're interpreted by our body as being so peaceful, and they bring us these states of regulation. So those are kind of the three things that I try to incorporate during the day: movement, stillness, and play. And then I have tools that really help my nervous system in the moment if I'm feeling myself becoming frustrated with my kids, or, running behind with work, or, annoyed with someone on the phone trying to charge me $50. That can really help me shift the state of my nervous system in the moment too.
Yes, let's talk about that. Share with us, like what does Michelle do?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple things I think that are really important for us to know before we kind of go through these. And the first is that as we study our nervous system, we come to understand that 80% of the nerves in our body originate in our body and send messages up to our brain, right? Only 20% of the messaging going on in your body and your nervous system is starting in your head and sending messages down to our body. So if our body, let's say, for example, is really tense, right? We're going through the day and our shoulders are kind of up by our ears and everything's really tense. Our body is sending messages to our brain. Hey, we're bracing for something that's not safe. We're bracing for something bad, right? We're holding tension because something's not going on. And there's a physiological kind of cascade of responses to that, right? But so many of us focus on our mindset, right? What's the story, affirmations, what have you. And our mindset is important. Yes, of course. But at the end of the day, if we're neglecting our body and we're only working on what's happening from the neck up, it's like a 4-to-1 tug of war, right? And we're not going to see a lot of improvement or shift or relief or whatever it is that we're looking for. So knowing that we need to get into our body with somatic tools is really helpful. And then the other thing to understand, knowing that, is that our body doesn't speak a verbal language. Like we cannot tell ourselves with words to just calm down, right? If something is so irritating, we can't just be like, chill out. Or if we're really worried about something, we can't just be like, oh, Michelle, calm down. It's not a big deal, right? It's like if anyone's ever told you that, you've experienced that, like, oh my gosh, it actually makes me so much more upset. It's not helpful. Our body understands cues of safety, not through words, but with movement, with breath, with sound, temperature, touch, like all of these different things that are not words. So we have to have tools that communicate safety to our body in the way our body understands. So for me, I think of the regulation resources and tools that I have kind of in these two different buckets. So where I'm at right now, do I feel like I need to down regulate, right? Am I feeling really activated, right? I'm really anxious. I'm really worried. I'm really angry. I'm really edgy. Like I'm all up here with all this energy and I need to like and bring it down. Or the opposite, right? Am I feeling kind of stuck today and slow moving? Am I feeling disconnected from my body? Am I kind of spacing out today? Am I procrastinating a lot? Those are signs that I would actually need to up regulate, right? That I'm in a dorsal vagal collapse and I would need to up regulate. So kind of starting to notice where I'm at and what does my body need? And then how can I meet that need with a somatic tool? So for me, I tend to run more of the higher energy states. So some things that work really well for me are shaking, right? So it's exactly what it sounds like. You guys have probably heard of it, but I'll literally just go in the bathroom and shut the door, or I'll do it in my kitchen, like with my kids, or I'll come in my office if I'm nervous about something or irritated about something, and just shake my body. Sometimes I'll put on one of my favorite dance songs, but man, 60, 90 seconds, 2 minutes of just shaking out my arms, shaking out my legs, allowing my hips to move, right? Allowing a lot of that energy to kind of discharge helps my body to complete that stress cycle, signals to my body, hey, we're moving, we're listening, we're evading the threat, right? And then my body can complete that stress loop. And then I can incorporate something that feels really soothing, like some breaths or a short meditation or just sitting and doing a body scan or something like that. My body responds really well to temperature. So sometimes when I'm feeling that way, I'll just go in the freezer and grab a bag of frozen vegetables, hold that on the back of my neck. That activates my vagus nerve, which is my body's calming mechanism. That can help bring me back into my body and make me feel grounded. Certain breaths, right? There's so many. You guys could probably go on YouTube and look up, a couple of breaths. You could do box breathing. You could do a physiological sigh. But there's these quick different breaths that can really help shift the state of your nervous system. Being in hot water, taking a shower or bath, being in cold water, right? We know the rage about cold plunges and ice baths. Going through resources and then really finding a handful of things, 3 or 4 resources that work well for your body, helping it feel safe, and then come back to that place where you feel like you're back in your body and you're grounded.
New to Authentic Parenting podcast? Welcome to a journey of healing and transformation. Since 2015, we've been pioneering the conversation on trauma-informed parenting and how doing your own healing work can make you a better parent. With over 10 years of content, it can feel overwhelming to know where to begin. That's why I have curated a special playlist just for you, a collection of 10 hand-picked episodes designed to help you get started. Want to understand how trauma impacts your body, brain, nervous system, parenting, and relationships, and how to heal and transform your life? Join world-leading experts like Dr. Gabor Mate, Deb Dana, Dr. Paul Conti, Dr. Dick Schwartz, Thema Bryant, and many more who have shared their wisdom on our show. Start your journey today. Download your free trauma kit now at authenticparenting.com/trauma kit. That's again, authenticparenting.com/trauma kit. Yeah, I think an important thing that I want to, highlight from what you're saying, and I'll connect to an episode that I did with Deb Dana on the podcast for the listener, like as an additional resource, which is phenomenal episode. She talks about the nervous system and the ladder and dorsal vagal and everything. I think it would be a really good resource. What you're saying is true. I think a lot of people can benefit from highlighting this. The two buckets, right? Are you like in what are you needing to downregulate? Are you in fight or flight? Like you have a lot of, activation, sympathetic activation, or you are like in the dorsal vagal, space where you need a little movement to like sort of slowly wake up and
Yes,
come out.
gentle. Yep.
Gentle, right? You need to know that because oftentimes people hear like a lot of tools shared on different podcasts, and it may not be the right one for your state, right? I also tend to run on the more sympathetic, activation. That's like my go-to, so I also need to downregulate myself. It's very rare I end up in the, dorsal vagal where I'm like sluggish and stuck. And it's like my go-to is the other one. So knowing how it works and figuring out tools for each, I think could be enormously helpful instead of just doing the wrong tool at the wrong time. I think that could be like, you will be disappointed.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is I agree with you 100%. And, when we're already feeling dysregulated, whichever end of the spectrum we kind of feel like we're on, some of these practices are, at the end of the day, they're also stressors on our body. They take like exercise, right? If you're someone who's feeling super stressed out and is in a season of high stress, and you're also training for a marathon and that feels cathartic, right? In the moment to go for this really intense run, I would encourage you to start to pay attention, big picture, what that does to your nervous system, because that's another stressor on your body. And your body doesn't do a good job differentiating between, exercise stress or something that's actually unsafe for our body. Stress is stress. So yeah, as you use these tools, knowing what do I think will benefit the state that I'm in, and like, how does it actually make me feel? Like, can I pay attention? Do I feel really good after a run, but then an hour later, I actually feel more anxious, right? Or more activated or more irritable? Noticing can be really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, this is really great. I'm loving our conversation. I want to end in some kind of a way. What would you say to yourself? Let's say if you went back like to that burnout time, knowing what you know today, what would you say to yourself?
Whew. I think I would remind myself that slowing down and asking for help and honoring my limits and my boundaries are what will actually be my superpower instead of the opposite, right? The things that I thought were strong, not showing any emotion, being the one in the room who knows all the things, going harder than everyone else. Like those were the things that eventually were my downfall, and they're just not sustainable. And I was doing them to mask a whole host of other things, right? That needed to be healed and brought to light. So I think just reminding myself that soft is safe, right? To me, that felt so unsafe. And in my body, right? Allowing myself to receive help most of all. And then just understanding that, hustle culture is really just a lie and it's not sustainable. And having practices for slowness and stillness are going to create such a richer life than just being on the hamster wheel that I had been on for so long.
Wow, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to ask me before we say goodbye?
I think I'm curious to hear from someone with children that are a few years ahead of mine. As you kind of reflect back, what are maybe one or two things that you're really grateful that you had the foresight to see and know that have really paid off in your parenting?
Ooh, The first thing that just came to me without like thinking too long about this, I'm sure there's more stuff, is keeping my gaze at the longer game of parenting and not being caught up in the minutia of day-to-day life and hyper focusing on I made a mistake, I should have done this, I packed the wrong lunch. Instead of focusing on that, knowing that there's a bigger picture of parenting and trying always to zoom out and see that it became my practice, and it's been so enormously helpful because, of course, we all make mistakes. We're not perfect. We do and say things, but the overall quality of the relationship that I cultivated with my daughter is more important than my day-to-day things. And I think just switching that, my gaze, I created that practice. I remember she was 3 years old. And, sometimes when you go out with a 3-year-old to a public restaurant, it's hard. They make mess, they scream, it's unpredictable. And every time we would go out, I was like on pins and needles because it was like, what's going to happen? How am I going to manage? I'm not going to enjoy my food and manage hers. So I was always tense. And the moment I said, what are you doing? I remember exactly where I was, in what restaurant. Like, I remember exactly the moment where I told myself, it doesn't matter. People have seen crying children. People are going to judge you. Some people will understand. And most importantly, you have to let go. You can't micromanage everything and the behavior and all of those things. And so I learned that in that moment, that it's the bigger picture of parenting that matters and not this every day. Because if you get caught up in that, you're going to be in this shame spiral and guilt and blame yourself and criticize yourself. And you're not going to feel good to parent, actually.
Yeah, that's so wise.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest. Well, there's other things I've cultivated, but I think that's the biggest one.
And what a gift for your daughter, but also what a gift for you.
So can I just say one more thing? My daughter is taking AP psychology class this year in her school. And there was a project that she needed to do. She needed to create a baby book, meaning they were learning about like nurture versus nature, child development, Piaget stages of child development, all sorts of things. But she needed to apply that knowledge and write about her upbringing and her childhood. For that project, she needed to, it was a scrapbook. She had to put pictures when she was born, 6 months, 9 months, appropriate for all developmental stages. She had to write, she had to interview me, my husband, about our parenting. She had to write about her attachment style. She had to do all this research and work. And at the end, I guess she learned a lot of things. And she came to me and she said, Mom, thank you so much. Like, for parenting me this way, you have given me this. I feel like I have secure attachment. She said so many things that she had learned through this project. I was like, oh my gosh, what a great testament of my great parenting. Like, why am I worried about, sometimes I fall into guilt and regrets. I should have done this. Why did I do it this way? Right? Parenting is filled with shame and guilt and regrets. But when she said that to me, something shifted. And I said, you know what? It's so true. Again, a reminder that that larger picture of parenting matters, not the small everyday things that we focus on. And our children's experience of our parenting is a lot different than our own perception of it.
That's so true. Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for being a wonderful guest. I truly enjoyed connecting with you, and thanks for sharing, openly and honestly. I hope this is helpful for the listener.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to be here. I appreciate you.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Be sure to hit that follow button so you don't miss future episodes, and take a moment to leave a rating and review. It really helps others find the show. I would love to hear your thoughts and takeaways. Join the conversation in the Authentic Parenting Facebook group or visit the contact page at authenticparenting.com/contact to get in touch. Authentic Parenting is an ad-free show, and your donations is what makes this podcast possible. Support the show by visiting authenticparenting.com/support or becoming a patron at patreon.com. Your contributions make it possible for me to continue bringing you weekly episodes. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.